Hello, this is Nathan Wood, pastor of North Dayton Baptist Church, and welcome to day 9 of the McShane Reading Plan. So glad you could join us today. We are in our first day that everything gets jumbled up, and the numbers will never be nice and even and matching the date ever again. But it's inevitable. Today we're in Genesis chapter 9 and 10, Matthew 9, Ezra 9, and Acts 9. Genesis 9 gives the end of the flood. Well, Genesis 8 did that, but it's a continuation of the end of the flood. And God establishes the token of his covenant. And for the token of his covenant, yes, folks, there was a time when God did not allow the rainbow to exist. Rainbows don't come from prisms and from water droplets. God allows them to be manifested through that means because he allowed creation to be tweaked in such a way that white light become refracted and that we are able to see that spectrum refracted at this time. I fully believe it. It's not that man couldn't see color. Well, we don't know that man could see color before now, but he gives them the bow as the token of his covenant. There's a rainbow around the throne of God. And I don't know how to describe it, but it's like an emerald. But the rainbow is God's banner. It's his mark. It's the sign of his promise. It's his trademark, if you will. So to take it out of context for any reason is a big deal and should not be taken lightly. But it's interesting because Noah is one of the most obedient servants that is ever listed in Scripture. For hundreds of years, he is obedient, laboriously acting upon a promise of mercy that he doesn't understand. It'd be like if God had told you that you were going to be surrounded in spaghetti sauce and you better construct a great big dinner plate to float on top of it. That's how ridiculous building a boat was to Noah in his time. It was completely foreign to him, say nothing to the whole world getting covered in water, but rain was a foreign concept. Fountains coming out of the earth was a foreign concept. It was unheard of. And for an unheard of disaster, God allows the rainbow to be manifest to humanity. But look what happens. Noah is not perfect. He falls into a drunken stupor where he's laying naked and when it says Ham, his son, beholds his father's nakedness, it's probably implying something that's way worse than just seeing his dad naked. It's probably an inclination of homosexual incest and dishonoring his father. And it's and his other two sons, Shem and Japheth, cover the nakedness of their father, and Ham is cursed. What does this tell us about Noah? Does this mean that Noah, being in a foolish state where he was being viewed and dishonored by his son in a state of drunkenness and nakedness, does this mean that Noah, we need to throw him under the bus and everything he ever did is ridiculous and we need to throw him out of fellowship? No, it doesn't. We need to be careful. We need to be careful about how we judge sinners, because yes, unrepentant sin is a big deal. Planned sin is a big deal. We don't want sin in the camp. meaning that we don't want sin in the camp. It's not, but if you say that you don't want sinners in the camp, you're going to have to start pointing the finger at yourself if you're not careful. Again, condoning sin is not the way to go, but we need to make sure that there's been a lot of talk lately about not putting people too high on a pedestal. And it's interesting because it seems like a lot of people who cry out for that really want to get traffic on their own blogs. Don't want to get too picky about that, but folks, we need to love people, and we need to understand that everybody's prone to fall. And for that reason, we need to pray for one another. And rather than pointing the finger at somebody who's wallowing in sin like Noah, we need to pick up a cover and cover the shame. That doesn't mean that we have to cover up for sin, but what it means is like we need to bear one another's burdens, bear one another's shame. We need to help each other take care of it. We need to help each other lift each other up. Throwing each other under the bus is not the way to go. That's just my 2 cents. So, yeah, we're all sinners, especially and even Noah. It's not to celebrate what he did. It's and again, what Ham did was way worse. But there's a difference in what Noah did and what Ham did. One is vindictive and destructive, and the other one is pretty much seems kind of accidental or circumstantial. But suffice it to say that we need to be careful about being too arrogant about our own righteousness and too vindictive and judgmental about other people's sin. Again, we don't celebrate sin. Sin lifestyle is awful. We should not want to practice it, but we need to show grace because we are all sinners saved by grace. It's interesting what Matthew has to say about Jesus when in Matthew 9. I don't know how I got bumped out of Matthew 9. Behold, they brought him a sick man, sick of the palsy, lying on a bed, and Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. And they get mad. The scribes and Pharisees get mad when he heals this man, sick of the palsy. And Jesus says, when Jesus heard that, he said unto them, They that behold need not a physician, but they that are sick. Religiosity is bad when it comes to self-worship. When you get to the point where you think you're so good that you don't even realize that you need Jesus, you've forgotten or never knew Jesus. And it's a bad state to be in, because whether you're saved or not in that situation, you're doing grave disservice to the kingdom by glorifying yourself above the Lord. It gets so bad that the Pharisees in verse 34 say, commit the unpardonable sin of the generation by blaspheming the Holy Spirit, saying, they said about him, but the Pharisees said, he casteth out devils through the prince of devils. The Pharisees were the conservatives of their day, just so you know. They were the ones that held to the law. They were the ones that believed that, yes, there needed to be a Levitical priesthood under the line of Aaron and nothing else. And that was true. That's what the law of Moses said. They wanted to keep to the traditions and the law that God demanded and worship him rightly. And they had become the minority party. But Jesus didn't join them. Didn't mean that they were necessarily wrong, but they were more wrong because they didn't recognize Jesus for who he was. And they didn't recognize Jesus for who he was because they were too busy worshiping themselves and their own righteousness and their own rightness, They were worshiping. We got it right, everybody. We got it right here. We got it right here in the law of Moses. And yeah, you all are wrong. You're sinners and you're going to hell. And it's like, yeah, they might have been. Yeah, they might have had the letter of the law right. But when God comes into their midst, when you're so full of yourself, let me put it like this. If you're busy worshiping yourself, you're going to call God the devil. If you're busy worshiping yourself, you're going to call God the devil. Now, there's religious people that may be within the Sanhedrin here, modern day. They might even be in the church, or they might even be atheists or agnostics, worshiping their own self without any concept of religion, or maybe New Age religion, or maybe a false paganism or something like that. Self-worship is at the center of all. Pride goes before the fall. Pride is the center of sin. Pride caused Satan to fall. You will be as gods caused Eve to fall. Yeah, when we worship ourselves, we tend to cast God as the devil, because anything that comes against our little deity is our adversary, and that's what Satan means, adversary. So when the Pharisees say he casted out devils through the prince of the devils, they didn't like Jesus and didn't believe him for who he said and what he did, because the throne of their heart was filled with themselves and their own righteousness. So Noah screws up bad, and I don't want to sound crass, but Noah messes up bad, and he gets in a bad situation. But his sons cover his nakedness. Japheth wants to capitalize and prey on his nakedness, whether it's because he wants to violate him, or whether it's because he wants to cause shame on him by drawing attention to it or condemning him for it. Both are wrong. It's something that we really need to take into consideration. Acts 9 is a big situation where somebody who was gravely proud came to God's mercy through great humility. You see, Jesus showed Paul mercy that he did not show the Pharisees of the time when he was walking the earth. Why, I don't know.
Okay, I found this on the web.
Sorry, Siri started.
It's all good.
Siri started listening to me. I don't know why. But basically what ends up happening is Saul is a Pharisee. Saul of Tarsus is a Pharisee. He's on his way to Damascus to want to imprison and kill Christians. And Jesus goes, "Why do you persecute me?" See, when you persecute, when you're a religious person persecuting sinners saved by grace, you persecute the Lord. And it's the same. He sees it as the same type of offense as the Pharisees were doing towards him then, calling him the devil. When you persecute sinners who are saved by the grace of God, Jesus sees it as persecuting him. And that's a tall order. But that's a comfort to Christians. Don't be prideful about it, and don't use it as a reason to say, "Yeah, go ahead and persecute me. See what happens." No, but it's something to be humble about. But it's something to be comforted. So when you suffer persecution, you can know that Christ takes it personally. But again, like I said yesterday, Paul, a persecutor of the church, enemy of Christ, persecutor of Christ, God does whack him upside the head, but God does take it personal. But he ends up taking his enemy and making him his friend and servant. He makes him a wonderful apostle. And for Saul, his life turned around. By all accounts, his life was really good when he was in authority over the Pharisees as a young rising star, but then it got really bad because everybody wanted to start to kill him. And even the church had a hard time trusting him initially. The apostles really didn't want to let him in either initially. So it's like he's got a hard road of it. But notice again, a grave sinner, a grave sinner, brought to redemption. Brought to redemption. You know, shouldn't they have wanted to string him up from the highest tree and let justice be done upon him for the crime? Yes, he may have been saved, but he needs to answer for what he did. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't the church demand the book be thrown at Saul of Tarsus for what he had done to them? Mercy according to Jesus. Christ-likeness. Mercy. So, I'm not trying to preach moral relativism here. I am not at all. Sin is sin, and it is heinous. I hate it in myself. I hate it in humanity and in society. It's a cancer. It twists us and it poisons relationships. Most notably and most importantly, our relationship with God. But let's be Japheth and Shem rather than the Pharisees. Let's be the Christians with Paul and Paul himself. Let's be Ananias, who obeyed God to restore Paul to a relationship. And let's keep the faith. Let's keep the faith in our families, because there's something that's awful bad that happens in the line of Ham after he violates his father's nakedness and trust. It's his grandson that becomes Nimrod. And the translation in King James says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And it's more like he was a hunter against the Lord, like he was God's enemy. Nimrod's the one that founds Babel and starts the ball rolling with Babylon being the ancient anti-Jerusalem. It indeed will be the entity that is the final manifestation of the kingdoms of the world consolidated against Christ. Sin permeates and is generational and hard to break. Let's pass the truth on. Let's have the truth in our hearts. Let's have the word. Yes, and the Pharisees were right to want to preserve the word and right traditions. Yes, that's good. But let's not worship the traditions in ourselves. Let's not worship ourselves. Worship Christ. Trust in Him and share His love with others. And when your brother stumbles and falls, seek to restore him. When your sister stumbles and falls, seek mercy. Seek to restore them. When we go about trying to tear each other down and shame each other, we act like we're better than God. So we need to make sure that we act with humility, because if we think we're standing, we might be the one that falls next. We love you. Have a good evening.